They used to call me the embarrassment. At every family gathering, my name came with a sigh, a forced smile, and a question like, "Still doing that little computer thing, Ava?" I was Ava Morgan, the artsy misfit in a bloodline of bankers, lawyers, and CEOs. My father, Franklin Morgan, once chaired the prestigious Wheatstone Trust. My brother, Bradley, was a Harvard grad turned hedge fund shark. My mother, of course, curated perfection, both in her floral arrangements and her children's resumes, all but one. 15 years ago, I walked away from an MBA program halfway through to build an augmented reality design startup out of my friend's garage in Oakland. They told people I had mental health issues and needed space to find myself. What I found instead was an untapped industry, but I never corrected them. Every holiday, I showed up in thrift store coats and rented cars. Every conversation about career trajectories skipped me like I was background noise. It was easier that way. Let them assume, let them feel superior. I was building something they'd never understand and never believe. So when I saw my name on the cover of Inc. magazine, I knew everything was about to change. The headline read, "AVA Morgan Shadow Work, the $9 billion company you've never heard of." Underneath, a sleek photo of me standing in front of a projected cityscape made from my own 3D rendering. The irony? That issue was dropping 2 days before the Morgan family's annual Legacy Gala, hosted of course by my parents. They had no idea I was coming. I hadn't planned to attend. I hadn't shown my face in nearly 4 years. But this year, I had a reason. A story to tell. A legacy of my own. So I RSVP'd, yes, quietly. No grand announcement. Just a single phone call to my assistant, Joe, book the jet, full team, NDA ready. I'm showing up. An hour later, Joe buzzed into my penthouse office. The helipad's reserved, the venue has been scanned, media blackout requested, all guests will be delivered via private motorcade. Shall I send the care packages to the Morgan residence? I sipped my espresso watching the San Francisco skyline blink like a circuit board. Yes, I said. Make sure the envelopes include the valuation documents and the rejected investment proposals. She nodded. Understood. Oh, and your brother Bradley is on line 1. Again, I let out a small, cold laugh. Let him wait. They've all waited 15 years to know who I really am. One more day won't kill him. The morning of the Legacy Gala arrived with surgical precision. I stood on the tarmac beside my jet, custom matte black with shadow work, etched in carbon steel beneath the cockpit windows. The crew prepped the welcome kits while I reviewed the attendee list one last time. It wasn't just my parents and siblings coming, it was every investor who'd passed on my company, every family friend who'd patted me on the head and asked when I was going to get a real job. They would all be there, suits pressed, smiles polished, unaware they were walking into a story they no longer controlled. Joe handed me a folder. Each package includes the proposal your father declined, the email your brother ignored, and a screenshot of the stock growth since. I nodded, flipping through them. Good, I said, eyes narrowing. Let's show them what invisible looks like in 9 figures. By the time I arrived at the gala venue, a sprawling estate in Napa Valley that had once belonged to my grandfather, the front gates were already a scene. Paparazzi weren't allowed, but word travels fast when a billionaire ghost shows up after 15 years of silence. I stepped out of the limousine in a deep emerald suit, sharp-lined and unapologetic. A hush fell. People stared, unsure how to process what they were seeing. Ava Morgan? The dropout? The ghost? Inside, the air was thick with anticipation. My mother spotted me first, wineglass frozen mid-sip. Her eyes widened, but she didn't speak. My father followed, his once imperial posture faltering for half a second, and then Bradley. Of course he was the first to approach, the family knight in tailored armor. "Ava," he said, trying to mask his shock. "You look different." I smiled coolly. Wealth does that. Then I handed him a black envelope. He opened it right there in front of the champagne fountain. I watched his jaw clench as he scanned the document, the valuation of my company, the offer I'd once begged him to consider, and the stock chart rising like a missile. "You're bluffing," he muttered. "This isn't." I raised a brow. "Then you'll love what's coming next." I walked into the ballroom without another word, letting him drown in that envelope. The room had been transformed per my request. Every table centerpiece was made of augmented glass sculptures, projects from my early collections. The entire back wall was a live feed montage of global installations powered by my tech. And in the center of the room, where the Morgan family crest usually sat, I had placed something else entirely, a floor-to-ceiling digital projection that read, "The legacy you tried to erase." Gasps spread like wildfire. My Aunt Clara dropped her champagne. The crowd turned toward the screen just as it began to play the highlight reel, my life, my art, my empire. And the silence that followed. It was the sound of a legacy collapsing in real time. For a moment no one moved. The screen behind me flickered through the years they never bothered to ask about: early prototypes, gallery launches, international press coverage, venture capital rounds that outpaced their entire portfolios. In the footage I stood shoulder to shoulder with tech giants they revered, speaking on stages they could only dream of. And through it all, I had remained silent. That silence, once mistaken for shame, had been strategy. Bradley pushed through the crowd toward me, face pale and stiff. "You really think this changes anything?" he spat, keeping his voice low. "You're still the girl who flunked out, who disappeared." I turned toward him slowly, meeting his bitterness with calm precision. "I didn't disappear," I said. "I evolved while you stayed exactly the same. And tonight, you'll see just how far behind you've fallen." From the podium, Joe tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll take your seats, Miss Ava Morgan will begin the evening address." My father tried to rise, to interrupt. I saw the twitch in his jaw, the way he clenched his fist around a cloth napkin like it might hold his authority together. But he didn't speak. Not yet. The tables filled, eyes fixed. The same family that once dismissed my every word now waited for my voice. I stepped into the spotlight without flinching. "Good evening," I began. "I know most of you are surprised to see me. I would be too if I'd spent the last decade pretending someone didn't exist just because they made you uncomfortable." A ripple moved through the crowd. A few gasps, a cough. One cousin tried to laugh, but it died quickly in his throat. "Tonight isn't just a reunion, it's a reckoning." My voice held steady as I detailed the moments that shaped me. The night my father told me I was wasting his legacy, the morning my mother offered me a brochure for a coding boot camp. Her version of a soft intervention. The years I was left off Christmas cards, group texts, and family investment circles. I pulled up a slide, a photo of my tiny garage studio in Oakland. The caption read, "Where you thought I failed." The next slide, my Hong Kong headquarters, current market cap, 9.7 billion. Another gasp. I turned toward my parents. "You wanted a legacy you could control. You ignored the one that was being built in silence, without your approval. You wanted obedience. I gave you brilliance. You just didn't recognize it." My mother looked down, shame creeping into her perfectly composed face. My father remained stone still, but something in his eyes flickered, like a fortress finally cracking. And then I ended with the one line I had waited years to say. "This isn't revenge," I said, scanning the room. "This is revelation." As the applause died down, I stepped off the stage and let the silence settle. It wasn't polite clapping. It was stunned, uncertain, restrained, like no one knew whether they should cheer or apologize. I didn't care. They weren't supposed to celebrate me. They were supposed to see what they missed, what they mocked, what they lost. My father rose, clearing his throat as if that alone could re-establish control. "Ava," he began, his voice low and measured, "this isn't how family handles things." I tilted my head. "And how exactly do we handle things, Dad? With silence? With exclusion? With lectures about stability while I was building something the world had never seen?" I gestured to the wall of digital projections behind me, each one a public reminder of what they failed to see privately. Then came the twist. Joel returned to the podium. "Before dinner is served, we'd like to share a brief legal announcement." Confused murmurs spread as she held up a document. Several years ago, Miss Morgan extended offers to multiple family members and colleagues to invest in the early stages of shadow work. These offers were not only declined, but also mocked, belittled, and in one case, forwarded to a competitor. A screen lit up with email excerpts, names redacted for now, laughter, dismissal, even one that read, "Tell Ava to get a real job." My father's face went white. Joe continued. "What none of you realized is that each rejection triggered a clause, a legal protection. These documents were archived, time-stamped, and validated by a blockchain system. Tonight, you'll receive physical copies alongside current valuation statements and a list of what your shares would be worth had you said yes." Gasps spread like wildfire. Whispers turned to nervous chatter. Bradley stood up abruptly. "You set us up," he said, voice trembling with disbelief. "You planned this for years?" I turned to him, calm and clear. "No, I gave you a chance. You set yourselves up by never believing in me. I just documented the story." That's when Joe handed out the folders. One by one, each person received theirs. My mother flipped through hers slowly, her perfectly painted nails trembling. Inside was a copy of the business proposal I'd sent her, framed beside the valuation today. It read, "Initial ask 50, missed equity value." They had laughed at me, now they were holding the proof in their hands. And I wasn't even done yet. The air inside the ballroom turned cold, not from the temperature but from realization. They weren't just late to the truth, they were complicit in burying it. The sound of paper shuffling echoed like thunder, every folder a mirror they couldn't escape, and the deeper they read, the paler their faces became. It wasn't just the money, it was the timeline, the emails, the proof that I had reached out again and again, and they had slammed the door each time. My cousin Elise, the one who used to call me Starving Ava at family dinners, looked up from her folder, her mouth slightly open. "This can't be real," she muttered. "All those years, you were already rich." I nodded, calm as ever. "By the time you called me a cautionary tale, I already had 6 patents and 3 international buyers." She looked down, the weight of her words crashing onto her chest. My father rose again, this time slower. "Ava, I didn't know you felt this, left out." I smiled tightly. "It wasn't about feeling left out, Dad. It was about being erased, dismissed. Laughed at over meals you barely noticed I was sitting at." I turned toward him fully now, every eye on us. "You taught me something though, the value of silence, the power of letting people show you who they are before you ever correct them." Tears welled in my mother's eyes. "You could have told us," she whispered. "We would have been proud." "No," I said, cutting her gently but firmly. "You would have been confused, then critical, then condescending. The pride would have come only after the press did the explaining for me." She looked away because she knew I was right. And then I revealed the final surprise. From the back of the room, a set of double doors opened. 2 staff members wheeled in a glass case, velvet-lined, and inside it, an old framed letter, the first contract offer I ever sent to a family member, rejected, signed with a dismissive postscript from my uncle. "This will never be worth anything, but nice try." Below the case sat a screen showing the valuation of those original shares today. The room fell into a hush so absolute, it felt sacred. And I stood in the center of it, not bitter, not smug, just finally seen. Dinner was served in complete silence, not the comfortable kind, but the kind that stretches across decades of unspoken truths. Crystal glasses clinked gently, silverware touched porcelain, but no one knew what to say. I sat at the head of the table now. Not out of entitlement, out of clarity. I wasn't the failure, I was the founder, and for the first time, every single one of them knew it. Bradley sat 2 seats away, his hands still gripping the edge of the folder like it might vanish if he let go. I watched him stare at the line that spelled out the worth of what he had once called a digital hobby. $2.3 billion. He had mocked me in front of others, called my vision childish, and offered to pull strings to get me an internship. I once cried over that offer. Tonight I smiled. Across from me, my father finally looked up. There were no words left to defend, no excuses, strong enough to stand on. "I underestimated you," he said quietly. "I underestimated everything about you." I took a long sip of wine, then replied, "You didn't underestimate me, Dad. You refused to see me, that's different." He nodded, accepting the sting. For the first time in my life, he looked small. I stood as dessert was cleared. "Before we end the night," I said, "I want to show you something new." A screen behind me lit up, this time showing a simulation of my next invention, a platform merging augmented reality and blockchain storytelling. Narratives that people could walk through, touch, own. The crowd watched in awe. "This will redefine art ownership," I said. "It launches in 2 weeks. Estimated launch valuation 10. The silence that followed wasn't just respect. It was surrender. One by one, they rose. Bradley first, then my mother, then even the investors who once dismissed me. They stood, not to applaud, but to acknowledge, to witness the undeniable, not just what I'd built, but who I'd become. Later that night, I returned to my suite. The moon cast a soft silver light over the sea. On the table was a handwritten note, my father's penmanship. You didn't just succeed, Ava. You rebuilt our entire definition of success. I see you now. I'm sorry it took me so long. Dad. I didn't cry, I didn't need to. The healing wasn't in their apology. It was in finally being free, not from them, but from the need for their approval. I had let them believe I was small so I could grow without limits. I had been the quiet one, the dismissed one, the underestimated one, and now, I was the one they would never overlook again. So here's my message to anyone listening. Let them laugh. Let them doubt. Let them say you can't. Then, build it anyway. And when the time is right, let the results do the talking. Because the sweetest revenge isn't loud. It's legendary.